You learned early how to disappear. Not physically. No one forgot to feed you or tuck you into bed. But emotionally. You learned how to shrink, how to read a room before speaking, how to soften your needs so they wouldn't become a burden, how to be easy, mature, low maintenance. You became skilled at silence. And here's the paradox no one ever told you. What once protected you is now quietly hurting you. Because the child who learned to stay invisible to survive grows into an adult who feels unseen even when surrounded by people. You might feel it in subtle ways, a constant pressure to be useful, a quiet anxiety when someone asks, "What do you want?" A strange emptiness after achievements that were supposed to finally make you feel enough. You weren't neglected in obvious ways. No dramatic stories, no clear villain. That's what makes this pain so difficult to name. It lives in the gaps, in what was never asked, in what was never mirrored, in the comfort you learned not to expect. As a child, you learned that attention had conditions, love had limits, and safety came from not needing too much. So you adapted. You became observant, emotionally intelligent, self-sufficient beyond your years. But beneath that competence was a quiet grief forming, the grief of not being fully seen while you were still becoming yourself. And that grief didn't disappear with age. It just got better at hiding.
Psychology has a name for this experience, though it often goes unrecognized. Emotional neglect. Not abuse, not abandonment, but the chronic absence of emotional attunement, the lack of being deeply seen, felt, and responded to. Children don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. When caregivers are overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, or preoccupied with survival, the child learns a devastating lesson. My inner world is something I must manage alone. This is where parentification often begins, not always in practical tasks, but emotionally. You learned to regulate others before yourself, to sense moods, to stabilize the environment. Your nervous system adapted through hypervigilance, a constant scanning for emotional shifts. The body learned that rest was unsafe. Calm meant something might be about to go wrong. Neurologically, this reshapes the default mode network, the system responsible for self-referential thought. Instead of curiosity and imagination, the mind defaults to monitoring, predicting, and controlling. Over time, this creates patterns of avoidant or anxious attachment. You may crave closeness but feel overwhelmed by it, or feel independent while secretly longing to be held emotionally. None of this means you were weak. It means you were adaptive. But adaptations designed for childhood don't always translate well into adulthood.
There is a specific kind of grief that comes from being unseen. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It hums quietly beneath your life. You mourn versions of yourself you never got to explore, emotions you swallowed because there was no space for them, dreams you postponed because responsibility came first. Carl Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." But there is another burden too, the unlived life of the child themselves. You learned to trade authenticity for acceptance, to trade spontaneity for stability, to trade needs for peace. And the cost shows up later as exhaustion without a clear cause, as guilt for resting, as a persistent feeling that you're behind in some invisible race. Seneca warned that we suffer more often in imagination than reality. But for the unseen child, the suffering wasn't imagined, it was internalized. You learned that being fully yourself might cost you connection, so you edited yourself, and the world praised you for it. Rilke once wrote,
Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Your dragon is not rage. It is the fear of taking up space.
Children who grow up unseen don't stop coping. They just evolve their strategies. You might recognize yourself in these patterns. In relationships, you overgive, overlisten, over-accommodate. You struggle to ask for help, and when you do, you minimize your needs. In boundaries, you feel guilty saying no. Rest feels earned, not deserved. In career, you tie your worth to usefulness. Productivity becomes proof of value. In self-worth, compliments make you uncomfortable. Criticism feels devastating. In emotional regulation, you stay composed until suddenly you're overwhelmed by emotions you didn't know were building. In identity, you know who others need you to be, but struggle to answer who you are. These are not flaws, they are coping mechanisms. They once kept you safe, but safety is not the same as fulfillment. Awareness is the first act of unlearning, not forcing change, not blaming the past, but gently noticing where survival still drives the wheel. Healing for the unseen child does not come from becoming louder. It comes from becoming truer. Inner child work begins with permission, to feel without fixing, to want without justifying, to rest without earning. Shadow work invites you to reclaim the parts you exiled, the anger, the need, the softness. Nervous system regulation teaches the body what the mind already knows. You are no longer in danger. And perhaps the most radical shift of all, choosing softness over survival. Not every moment needs vigilance. Not every relationship needs management. Not every emotion needs containment. There is a quote that captures this perfectly. You don't heal by becoming someone new. You heal by allowing yourself to be who you were before you learned to hide. The goal is not to be fixed. The goal is to become whole. If this spoke to something inside you, share it with someone who might need it too. And if you want to continue exploring the psychology of healing, identity, and becoming, subscribe. Because being seen begins with seeing yourself. And this time, you don't have to disappear to belong.